their God and their guru. You got to do it, people, because otherwise we're shooting in the dark here. We're talking around the issue. We're not talking about fundamentally what these people believe and what they're trying to do to all of us and how they're trying to restructure our government to fulfill their ideology, which most people don't know about. They just think it's the same old white supremacy we've seen since the inception of this country. And yes, it's that in part, but it's also got a new overlay on it that we need to really analyze and understand what our fight looks like. But the resistance, Adjoa, you are 100% right. The resistance is everything.
Right. And we got to take our hats off to the folks around the country that have been resisting, that are getting together. Yes. They're rallying all around. They're hearing it. They're seeing it. They're resisting. Or, Barbara, as I like to say, Congressman Al Green started when he was raising his cane to say, I object. Right. And now we're seeing all around the country people raising their cane or raising cane, as my parents used to say, saying, I object to what's going on. And that's what's really important now is that we've got to raise cane to certainly protect our interests here in our democracy so that we know that we'll be able to continue to elect and be a representative form of government. Barbara, one of the things I wanted to touch on, because, Professor Aiyetoro touched on it, was reparations in the vote. And I think one way that we're seeing the suppression of the vote that is now really a hard effort coming from this administration and from this Congress is from the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, the SAVE Act. Barbara, could you touch on the SAVE Act and why it is so important that people know what it has the ability to do and why we need to be aware of it?
We want to thank the millions of people who have been calling Congress. And if you're not one of them, you got to become one of them, who have been calling Congress and saying no to the SAVE Act. Vote no on the SAVE Act. It passed the House on a strictly almost, all party line vote. It's on its way to the Senate now for consideration, and it needs 60 votes right now to pass in the Senate. So it's imperative that everybody oppose this act. What this act does is it says that you cannot register to vote unless you produce a passport or birth certificate or the equivalent of those two. You can't use your real ID. You can't use your student ID. You can't use any of that. And it says for married women that your ID must, listen to this, folks, must match the birth certificate. So if I've gotten married and my new last name is Smith and I was born a Arnwine, then all of a sudden they say that I can't register because my birth certificate doesn't match my current identification. That's 62 million married women in this country. Come on, who have taken their husbands' names. We have been protesting this aspect of the SAVE Act for 2 years, and they haven't changed it. Why haven't they changed it? Because they don't like the way women have been voting on issues regarding reproductive rights. You see, all of this is tied together. When you connect the dots, you see why it's so important that we are vocal and heard. So if you have not called your senator yet, your senators yet for your state, you must do so. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. Do it today. Do it tomorrow. Do it the next day. Keep doing it until the vote is taken and we defeat this ugly voter suppression measure that would hurt over not only the 62 million I mentioned, but would hurt 21 million people who don't have access to a birth certificate, would hurt, think about this, folks, would hurt the 150 52 million Americans who don't have a passport. People, come on. It's time to be heard. Speak up. This democracy's been running all these years without these rules. They don't need them. They're only doing it to suppress the browning of America. They don't like the demographic change that blacks and browns and other people are now voting. It's time for you to be heard. 202-224-3121. Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, Barbara. And, and when we're talking about that SAVE Act, and Barbara, what you laid out so nicely was that the vast majority of Americans do not have a passport. So that's not going to be something that you can use to be able to register to vote because you don't have it. So then you will have to go to your birth certificate. But it doesn't just say a birth certificate. It's got to be a certified birth certificate. So the copy you have may not be acceptable for you to be able to register and be able to vote. So this is a large part of what's going on, and what Professor Aiyetoro was laying out, and I think so beautifully so that it fits right in, is that we're talking about really how this administration and how this Congress is trying to disenfranchise the voting power of the browning of America. They're trying to disenfranchise it and disempower it so that it can go through and have a minority rule with regards to what happens in this country. That's what the SAVE Act is all about. We're hopeful that it will not pass the U.S. Senate because it's going to require, 60 votes to overcome any type of filibuster or anything like that. And this will give, certainly senators that are in the Senate the opportunity to try to stop this from coming into place. But this is a major issue of what's being presented now. And it's so important, folks, that you dial that 202-224-3121 number and just register your opposition to it. Professor Aiyetoro, we're coming on the last turn on this show, the last rounding of the last corner on the show. One of the things that you have picked up that I wanted to certainly clarify is that you talked about the administration being in opposition to immigrants in the United States and migrants coming to the United States. That's not true for all migrants, though, right? Because they're reaching out to white South Africans and offering them refuge here. Come on, Professor Aiyetoro.
Yes, you're right. Oh, I'm glad you raised it. But see, it goes along with my view. Not my view. It's documented that the fundamental basis of the perspective of the Trump administration is one that lifts up whiteness and puts down brown and yellow and all of that, right? So we call it racism. We say that maybe you can call it, as Barbara says, it's more than the upliftment of white superiority or white supremacy, the myth of white superiority and the myth of white supremacy. But it is, and you just see it when they're offering free, come, to our country, the white South Africans, and they're saying because the South African government is trying to address the land distribution. And it's a lie that they're taking land. See, they ground it in lies, the Trump administration. They're not taking land from whites. They are looking at land that is there, exists, to see how they can redistribute it that's government owned. They can redistribute it to the black South Africans and the brown South Africans. But they're using
where the land originated. Where the land originated.
Yes.
That's where the ownership originated.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. So you're right. They're not. Their policy on immigration is also color based. I don't say race based, color based. It's white come, brown, black, don't come. Right.
And as we're coming up against the ending of this show, Professor Dr. McRae, Dr. McRae, next week we're going to go heavy into this whole thing with regards to Americans potentially being deported to foreign jails, as well as of folks that are on American soil not being given due process to go into, being forced to go into jails that are overseas in El Salvador, folks that are just being taken off the streets because they appear to be of Latino descent. In closing out your closing remarks, and I know next week is just going to be off the chain as we talk to the attorney that's representing Mahmoud Khalil and perhaps a couple of other attorneys with regards to what's happening. But Dr. McRae, I wanted to give you a chance to take a moment to give us some closing remarks about what you've heard today and why folks should tune in next week.
I think next week, just like all the conversations on Igniting Change, are vitally important. Folks need to be engaged and understand how these questions that are being raised affect them indirectly as well as directly, because if it's not them today, it'll be them tomorrow. And as Barbara has been illustrating and begging, literally, folks to call your Congress members. This is not right. And as Senator Booker said, it's not a question of, Republican or Democrat. It's a question of right or wrong. We have to be able to stand for something versus falling for anything. People aren't critical thinking. They're taking everything that folks are telling them as gospel versus doing their own research and seeing with their own eyes what they're telling you isn't real. If you see people that are being just deported or disappeared off of the street, winding up in, of all places, Louisiana, in detention centers in inhumane conditions, or carted off overseas to El Salvador, and that's never happened again, and a president stating he wants to do it further, that's wrong. And we need to stand up. The work that TJC does, that Professor Adjoa does, is vitally important. It affects us daily. And like I said, if it doesn't affect you now, it'll affect you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Dr. McRae. Professor Aiyetoro, we have about 30 seconds if you'd like to make a closing comment with regards to what we've discussed today and why listeners should stay tuned.
Well, I think our listeners should stay tuned because this program develops and offers ways of resistance. It offers information on what's happening, but it also directly and indirectly offers ways of resistance. My closing remarks my closing comment is just that. We must resist.
Amen. We must resist. We must resist. Folks,
and Daryl, before we go off, everybody, we are involved on this whole fight around the National Museum for African American History and Culture. We are involved in the fight for Black museums nationwide. We want folks to really pay attention to this attempt to erase our culture. Put on your calendars right now that on April the 27th through May 3rd, you're going to be active in doing everything you can to protect our Black history. Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you. Folks, go to tjcoalition.org. Find out what's going on. Be certain that you continue to not buy from Target. Let's continue to make Target pay for being anti-DEI. Show what DEI is all about. Until next Tuesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, get off the sidewalks, get into the streets, get in some good trouble, and stand up and be heard, because a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Until next Tuesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, peace, everybody.
Peace.
The preceding program was paid for by Barbara Arnwine.
I'm Tumani. When I was younger, I may have did some stupid things. I committed some crimes, even got shot, but I'm not a criminal.
That's right. I'm Jamal. I work for youth advocate programs. Yeah, I was Tumani's advocate, helping him stay out of jail, stay in the neighborhood, get a job, and work hard to see a better future for himself. If you have a change of mindset, you can have a change of action.
As a little kid, I experienced trauma.
News Talk 1450 and 95.9 WOL with the Carl Nelson Show. Weekdays from 6 to 10 a.m. Reverend Al Sharpton keeping it real from 1 to 4 p.m. And the Tavis Smiley Show from 4 to 7 p.m. Download our mobile app and take us everywhere you are, or listen live at WOLDCnews.com. The news and issues that matter to you most, from Carl Nelson, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Tavis Smiley on 1450 and 95.9 WOL. 1450 WOL, Washington, D.C. 95.9 W240DJ, WMMJ HD3, WDCJ FM HD3, and worldwide at WOLDCnews.com.
The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.